There's a dangerous illusion spreading through our culture that solitude is just another lifestyle choice. Like choosing organic food or meditation apps, people retreat into what they call solitude, thinking they're embarking on a journey of self-discovery. But instead, they're making critical mistakes that turn isolation into a sophisticated form of self-deception. Christopher Lasch, the brilliant social critic who exposed the psychological underbelly of modern culture, understood that most people's attempt at solitude is actually a flight from the very self-knowledge they claim to be seeking. Lasch wrote extensively about what he called the culture of narcissism, a society so obsessed with self-image and external validation that even our attempts at solitude become performances rather than genuine encounters with our authentic nature. He knew that true solitude requires confronting uncomfortable truths about ourselves, while fake solitude allows us to maintain our illusions while appearing to do inner work. Today, I want you to understand the fatal mistakes that Christopher Lasch identified in how modern people approach solitude, mistakes that transform what should be a journey toward authentic self-knowledge into what he called the solitude of narcissistic withdrawal. This isn't about discouraging you from seeking alone time. It's about ensuring that your solitude serves genuine growth rather than sophisticated self-deception. And before we explore these fatal mistakes through Lasch's penetrating social analysis, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I want to know, have you ever used solitude as an escape rather than as genuine self-examination? Your honesty might help someone else recognize their own patterns. The first thing Lasch understood about modern solitude is that most people approach it with what he called therapeutic expectations, believing that alone time should make them feel better, more peaceful, or more enlightened. But Lasch knew that genuine solitude often makes you feel worse before it makes you feel better, because it forces you to confront the aspects of yourself and your life that you've been avoiding through constant activity and social distraction. Lasch observed that our culture has conditioned us to expect immediate emotional gratification from every experience, including spiritual and psychological practices. We want solitude to be like a spa treatment for the soul, something that reliably produces feelings of calm, clarity, and self-satisfaction. But authentic solitude, according to Lasch's understanding, is more like psychological surgery, necessary for healing, but inherently uncomfortable. When people approach solitude with therapeutic expectations, they often abandon it the moment it becomes challenging. They retreat from alone time when difficult emotions arise, when uncomfortable memories surface, when they're forced to confront their own contributions to their problems. Lasch called this the therapeutic retreat, the unconscious avoidance of genuine self-examination disguised as self-care. Fatal mistake number 1, treating solitude as emotional self-medication rather than honest self-examination. Lasch understood that many people use what they call solitude as a sophisticated form of emotional avoidance. Instead of genuinely being alone with themselves, they curate their alone time to avoid anything that might challenge their self-image or force them to question their assumptions about themselves and their life. This might look like filling your solitude with spiritual practices that make you feel special rather than humble, reading self-help books that confirm what you already believe rather than challenging your perspective, or meditating in ways that create pleasant experiences rather than honest self-awareness. Lasch called this the narcissistic hijacking of solitude, where alone time becomes another way to maintain your idealized self-image rather than encounter your actual self. True solitude, according to Lasch, requires what he called the courage of disillusionment, the willingness to see yourself clearly, even when what you see is disappointing, uncomfortable, or challenges your preferred narrative about who you are. This means being alone with your anger, your sadness, your fears, your shame, your contradictions, your failures, your ordinary human messiness. But most people, conditioned by what Lasch called the therapeutic culture, expect their inner work to feel good and produce immediate benefits. When solitude brings up difficult emotions or uncomfortable insights, they interpret this as evidence that they're doing something wrong, rather than recognizing it as a sign that they're finally doing something real. Write in the comments now, "I embrace uncomfortable truth." Say it like you're committing to genuine self-examination rather than emotional self-medication. Fatal mistake number 2, using solitude to maintain the illusion of superiority over others. Lasch identified a particularly dangerous form of narcissistic solitude where people retreat from social interaction not to know themselves better, but to preserve their sense of being special, enlightened, or above the unconscious masses. This kind of solitude becomes what he called a fortress of self-righteousness, rather than a space for genuine self-knowledge. This mistake manifests when your alone time is spent judging others rather than examining yourself, when you use your spiritual or philosophical insights to feel superior to those who haven't done the work, when your solitude becomes a way to avoid the messy realities of human relationship and community, rather than preparing you to engage more authentically with others. Lasch understood that this kind of solitude is actually a form of what he called defensive grandiosity, a psychological strategy for avoiding the vulnerability and humility that genuine self-knowledge requires. Instead of using alone time to recognize your own flaws, limitations, and ordinary humanity, you use it to reinforce your sense of being special, different, or more evolved than others. This defensive solitude prevents genuine growth because it maintains the very ego inflation that authentic solitude is meant to dissolve. You're not becoming more humble, compassionate, or self-aware. You're becoming more isolated, judgmental, and disconnected from the human community that provides the mirror necessary for real self-knowledge. Lasch observed that people who fall into this trap often become what he called spiritual narcissists, individuals who use their inner work as another form of achievement and status, rather than as genuine transformation. Their solitude becomes a way to collect insights, experiences, and realizations that make them feel superior, rather than a way to dissolve the very sense of superiority that prevents authentic connection with life. Fatal mistake number 3, confusing withdrawal from society with liberation from social conditioning. Lasch understood that many people believe that simply being alone automatically frees them from the social influences that have shaped their personality and worldview. But he knew that physical solitude doesn't necessarily create psychological freedom, because we carry our social conditioning inside us wherever we go. You can be completely alone and still be unconsciously performing for an imaginary audience, still seeking validation from internalized voices, still operating according to social scripts that you've never consciously examined. Lasch called this the illusion of autonomous selfhood, the belief that isolation automatically creates independence from social influence. True freedom from social conditioning, according to Lasch, requires conscious examination of how deeply social expectations, values, and definitions of success have penetrated your psyche. This means questioning not just what others expect of you, but what you expect of yourself. Not just rejecting social values that don't serve you, but recognizing how those values have already shaped your desires, fears, and sense of identity. Many people retreat into solitude thinking they're escaping social pressure, but they're actually bringing that pressure with them in the form of internalized expectations about what their solitude should accomplish, how they should feel, what insights they should gain, what kind of person they should become through their inner work. Hit like if you're ready to examine your own social conditioning, and subscribe if you want more insights into Lasch's analysis of authentic versus narcissistic solitude. Fatal mistake number 4. Seeking solitude to avoid rather than improve your capacity for relationship. Lasch identified a particularly modern form of solitude that he called relational avoidance, where people use alone time as an escape from the challenges of authentic human connection rather than as preparation for deeper, more honest relationships. This mistake occurs when your solitude becomes a refuge from the demands of genuine intimacy, the messiness of family dynamics, the complexity of friendship, the vulnerability of romantic love. Instead of using alone time to develop the self-awareness, emotional regulation, and authenticity that make good relationships possible, you use it to avoid relationships altogether. Lasch understood that this kind of solitude often appeals to people who have been hurt in relationships or who find human connection demanding and unpredictable. But he also knew that complete relational avoidance prevents the kind of growth that can only happen through the mirror of interaction with others. True solitude, according to Lasch, should make you more capable of authentic relationship, not less interested in human connection. It should help you see your own relational patterns more clearly, develop better boundaries, increase your capacity for genuine intimacy, and prepare you to engage with others from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. When solitude becomes a permanent escape from relationship, rather than a temporary retreat that enhances your relational capacity, it becomes what Lasch called a sophisticated form of social withdrawal that prevents the kind of growth that requires feedback, challenge, and the humbling recognition of how you affect others. Fatal mistake number 5, turning solitude into another form of consumer experience. Perhaps Lasch's most prescient insight about modern solitude is how quickly it gets absorbed into what he called the consumer mentality, where even spiritual and psychological practices become products to be consumed rather than disciplines to be practiced. This shows up when people approach solitude with what Lasch called the shopping mall mentality, collecting experiences, insights, and spiritual techniques as if they were purchasing items to improve their lifestyle. Your solitude becomes filled with spiritual consumerism, meditation apps, self-help books, retreat experiences, all designed to give you the feeling of growth without requiring the difficult work of genuine transformation. Lasch understood that consumer culture has conditioned us to expect that we can purchase solutions to our deepest problems, that there's always a technique, practice, or experience that will give us what we're seeking without requiring us to fundamentally change how we approach life. This mentality transforms solitude from a discipline into a hobby, from a practice into an entertainment. Real solitude, according to Lasch, requires what he called the discipline of sustained attention, the willingness to stay present with whatever arises in your inner experience, without immediately trying to fix it, change it, or consume something that will make it more pleasant. This means being alone without agenda, without trying to achieve anything, without collecting insights or experiences for your spiritual resume. Write in the comments, I practice undisciplined solitude. Say it like you're committing to being alone without agenda, rather than treating solitude as another form of self-improvement project. But here's where Lasch's analysis becomes truly profound. He understood that these fatal mistakes aren't just individual errors. They're symptoms of what he called the cultural crisis of authenticity, a society-wide confusion about the difference between genuine self-knowledge and sophisticated self-deception. Lasch observed that modern culture has created what he called the therapeutic state, where everything, including spirituality and solitude, gets filtered through the lens of making you feel better about yourself, rather than helping you see yourself more clearly. This cultural bias toward comfort and self-esteem over truth and growth affects how people approach solitude, often turning it into another form of ego maintenance rather than ego transcendence. The solution, according to Lasch, isn't to avoid solitude, but to approach it with what he called tragic wisdom, the understanding that genuine self-knowledge is often uncomfortable, that real growth requires loss as well as gain, that authentic solitude involves confronting the limitations and contradictions of human existence rather than transcending them. This tragic wisdom leads to what Lasch considered authentic solitude, characterized by what he called productive discomfort, the willingness to sit with difficult emotions and uncomfortable insights without immediately trying to resolve them or make them more pleasant. This kind of solitude doesn't promise to make you feel better. It promises to make you more real. Authentic solitude, in Lasch's understanding, is characterized by several qualities that distinguish it from narcissistic withdrawal. It increases your capacity for genuine relationship rather than decreasing your interest in human connection. It makes you more humble rather than more superior. It confronts your social conditioning rather than just escaping it. It embraces discomfort as a teacher rather than avoiding it as an enemy. Most importantly, authentic solitude serves what Lasch called the common good, rather than just personal gratification. When you do genuine inner work, when you develop real self-knowledge, when you confront your own limitations and contradictions with honesty, you become more capable of contributing to your community, your relationships, and the larger human project of creating a more conscious and compassionate world. And this is where Lasch's analysis becomes a call to action, rather than just a critique. He understood that the cultural crisis of authenticity affects everyone, that the confusion between genuine and fake solitude is part of a larger confusion between genuine and fake everything in modern life. But he also believed that individuals who commit to authentic inner work can become what he called islands of sanity in a culture that often promotes sophisticated forms of self-deception. The person who approaches solitude with tragic wisdom, who uses alone time for genuine self-examination rather than emotional self-medication, who confronts their social conditioning rather than just escaping it, becomes a resource for others seeking authentic transformation. Your genuine inner work becomes a gift to the community because it models what real growth looks like. So if you've been drawn to solitude but found it disappointing or difficult, if you've wondered why your alone time doesn't produce the peace and clarity you expected, if you've struggled to distinguish between genuine and fake forms of inner work, Lasch would tell you that these struggles are signs of health rather than failure. The difficulty you experience in authentic solitude, the discomfort that arises when you stop avoiding yourself, the humbling recognition of your own limitations and contradictions, these are indicators that you're finally engaging with reality rather than maintaining illusions about yourself and your spiritual development. Learn to approach solitude without therapeutic expectations. Practice being alone with difficult emotions without immediately trying to fix them. Examine your social conditioning rather than just escaping it. Use your alone time to prepare for better relationships rather than avoiding relationship altogether. Resist the consumer mentality that turns everything, including spirituality, into a product to be consumed. When you avoid these fatal mistakes, when you approach solitude with the tragic wisdom that Lasch advocated, you don't just improve your own psychological health, you contribute to what he called the recovery of authentic culture, the gradual healing of a society that has lost touch with the difference between genuine and fake transformation. Write in the comments now, I choose authentic solitude. Say it like you're committing to the difficult but necessary work of genuine self-knowledge, rather than the comfortable illusions of therapeutic self-care. This is Christopher Lasch's great contribution to anyone seeking authentic inner development. The understanding that solitude, like everything else in modern culture, can be either genuine or fake, either serving real growth or maintaining sophisticated illusions, either contributing to authentic transformation or perpetuating narcissistic self-deception. If this analysis resonates with you, if you're ready to approach solitude with the tragic wisdom that makes genuine transformation possible, then you've found your community. Subscribe to join others who understand that the most important inner work is often the most difficult, that authentic solitude requires courage rather than comfort, and that genuine self-knowledge serves not just personal growth, but the healing of our culture's crisis of authenticity. Because when people learn to avoid the fatal mistakes that turn solitude into sophisticated self-deception, they become living examples of what authentic inner work actually looks like, contributing to a culture that values truth over comfort, reality over illusion, and genuine transformation over therapeutic self-improvement.